Welcome back, everyone. It's me from the channel. Today we're going to be exploring some crazy body facts. And this one is going to blow your mind. Your muscles remember more than you think. So there are these two major ideas that people have in their minds when they hear something like this. One is that after you stop training, you lose all of your strength and muscle gains. Or number two, you actually retain all of your strength and muscle indefinitely. Neither of those is true. And instead, it's somewhere in between. So if you stop doing curls, for example, and then you decide 6 months later that you want to start curling again, you don't have to go back down to 5 pounds and start all over. You can pick up the 35-pound dumbbells and do curls and probably do just fine. You don't even really have to think about what you're doing. Your brain remembers what it was like to curl those 35-pound dumbbells, and it's able to kind of cue everything that needs to happen in order to get the job done. That's what we're talking about here. This isn't necessarily true for every single exercise, but it definitely applies to many exercises. And what's interesting is that if you don't believe this, you can see that this happens all the time with athletes. If an athlete tears their ACL and they have to have reconstructive surgery on their knee, and then they have to rehab that knee, it's amazing how fast they can come back to almost 100% of what they were doing before. Even though they haven't trained their leg to move that way ever since the surgery, that's because their brain still remembers how to control that movement and cue their body to do what needs to happen. Even if the muscles are weaker and the tendons are weaker, at least it knows what movements need to happen in order to get things done. How does this happen? Well, let's break down the nervous system real quick. So your brain sends signals through your spinal cord and down your nerves to your muscles. When you contract a muscle, that signal is sent down your motor neurons to your muscles, and it causes the muscle fibers to contract, which makes your muscles move. There are different levels of motor units, so there's a high threshold motor units and low threshold motor units. High threshold motor units are bigger, require more energy, and they're responsible for more force. Low threshold motor units are smaller, require less energy, and they're used for more finesse type movements. They're both important. Both are going to be recruited for most movements that you do, whether it's walking or running, lifting heavy things, or throwing a baseball. The high threshold motor units send out what's called an alpha motor neuron that goes directly into the muscle fiber and innervates that muscle fiber. These alpha motor neurons are huge. They're like 10 times larger than these other ones called gamma motor neurons. The gamma motor neurons, however, instead of innervating the muscle fiber, they actually innervate the muscle spindle. If you've never heard of the muscle spindle, it's basically a stretch reflex. It's the thing that when you tap your knee with a little hammer, you kick your leg out. Your brain knows that if you tap that tendon, it's going to cause a stretch. So it's going to contract the muscle in order to prevent further stretch. That's a really simplified explanation, but that's essentially what the muscle spindle does. Muscle spindles are located in the belly of the muscle and run parallel to the muscle fibers. They sense any change in length of the muscle and then communicate that information to the brain through the gamma motor neurons. When you train a muscle, you're also training the muscle spindle. You're teaching it new things. So when you learn a new skill, you're changing the way that your brain cues your muscles to move, but you're also changing the way your muscle spindle responds as well. So when you go to lift a weight for the first time, your brain will only cue low threshold motor units. So it'll use smaller motor units to try to get the job done. When you increase the weight load, however, eventually you'll get to a point where those low threshold motor units can't get the job done. And at that point, you'll recruit higher threshold motor units. So bigger, stronger motor units will kick in and help out. This is called motor unit recruitment. So let's say you went from using your low threshold motor units to now using your high threshold motor units to get the weight off the ground. Your brain has stored that information. So the next time you pick that same weight up, it's going to know that it's going to need to activate those higher threshold motor units right away. It's not going to waste any time trying to get those lower threshold units to do more work than they can handle. Because of this, you can make rapid strength gains when you first start training. Once you stop training, however, those motor units don't just shut off, they stay active and ready to go. That's why you can come back to an exercise and start close to where you left off. Here's an example. In a study done by Kramer et al. In 1987, they had untrained men perform a training program for 10 weeks. That training program consisted of a squat, bench press, and deadlift. After those 10 weeks, the men gained an average of 34 pounds of muscle. Now after those 10 weeks, the participants stopped training. They didn't do anything for 4 weeks. Then they came back and did a 1-rep max test on the squat, bench press, and deadlift. What do you think their 1-rep maxes were? Here's the kicker. They weren't significantly different from when they were at their peak. They lost a little bit of strength, but not very much at all. If they would have been completely untrained, you would expect their 1-rep maxes to be much lower than this, closer to 0. That's because their brains and their muscle spindles remembered how to perform these movements and activate the necessary motor units to perform them. Here's another study. This one done by Gall et al. In 1986. They had participants perform whole body exercises such as squats, lunges, bench press, pull-ups, and rows. They trained for 8 weeks and made good strength gains, just like you would expect. Then they had a 4-week detraining period. After the 4 weeks, they came back and tested their strength again. Again, they didn't lose much strength at all. How long does this last? It varies person to person, but in general, you can retain a lot of your strength for longer than you might think. It doesn't last forever. Eventually, you do forget things, and you do lose some strength. How long that takes is going to depend on how fit you are. The more advanced you are, the longer it will take for you to forget things. It's also going to depend on the exercise. If it's a skill-based movement like hitting a baseball, you'll probably forget that skill much faster than something like a squat. If you are thinking that this means you can just take a break for a few weeks and come back and pick up where you left off, that's not entirely true. While you do retain a lot of your strength and muscle memory, you will lose some, especially if you're further along in your fitness journey. So should you keep training all your life? Of course not. It's important to take breaks. Taking a break can allow you to reset and come back with a fresh new perspective. It can allow you to avoid getting stuck in a plateau. But what it doesn't mean is that you have to start all over when you come back. You can come back to where you left off or pretty close to it. Just don't expect to be 100% of what you were before. That was it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. Make sure you subscribe. Also, I recently started posting some updates over on another platform. If you'd like to support the channel and see some exclusive stuff, head on over there. I'll see you guys soon.